LA Metro Magazine podcast is here to bring you the entertaining, informative, and inspiring stories of the people who live, work, and play in the greater Lewiston-Auburn, Maine area. I'm your host, Colby Michaud. For my final interview of this inaugural season, we get to hear from Tom Platz. A longtime resident of Auburn, Tom has his hands in a number of organizations, understands the importance of attracting young professionals to the Twin Cities, and notably is someone who not only believes in the power of community, but puts that philosophy into practice every day. Our conversation takes us on a journey from the founding of his architecture firm, to his involvement in local theater and art, to uncovering the title of one of his most treasured books. This is LA Metro Magazine Podcast, Episode 17. Hi, Tom.
How you doing, Colby?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for being on LA Metro Magazine Podcast.
Not at all. My pleasure.
It's an honor. Let's jump right in.
You okay?
Could you take us back in time and give us sort of a condensed history of where you grew up and what led you to where you are today?
Sure. I was born at the time it was called Central Maine General Hospital, CMMC. Grew up in Auburn, went through the Auburn school system, graduated from Edward Little High School. Then went down to Boston, went to college for 4 years, took about 3 years off between college and grad school, worked in an architectural firm, and then I continued on with my studies, got a master's in architecture, and came back to the Lewiston-Auburn area to meet up with my brother who had just gotten his engineering degree, and we started Platz Associates as an architectural and engineering firm. And then,
when did Platz Associates start?
So Platz Associates incorporated in 1980, so we're in our 40th year now.
Okay.
Yes.
And it was just the two of you?
It started out just the two of us, and then we slowly grew. I mean, we're not a huge firm right now. We've got about 10 employees, and it's just about the right size. That's we've had a few more at times and a few less, but generally that's about the size firm we are.
Mm-hmm. What brought you back to Lewiston-Auburn?
Well, I thought a lot about it. I, as I told you, I spent actually 3.5 years working for an architectural firm down in Cambridge, which was great. I enjoyed it. I mean, we got a chance to do large-scale projects. We did the New England Aquarium. We did the Baltimore Aquarium. We were the architects for the San Antonio Museum of Art. Some really, really interesting projects to work on. But by the same token, my brother and I had always talked about starting our own firm. And as a young architect, starting a firm in Boston is ludicrous. I mean, there are so many architects graduating from school down there, and so many huge firms, middle-sized firms, small firms. You would just spend every day trying to get a job. So I felt like I know Maine, familiar with people. I thought it would be a little easier to ease into it, get some interesting jobs, and build our own practice. And also I had as much as I do like the cities, they're vibrant, they're fun to be in. I think it's a hard place to live and raise a family. So Maine had a lot of attraction in that way. And coming back to Auburn was really, it was familiar. I think it was easier to start here.
Yep. You had the support of the friends, family, and the community that you already were familiar with? Yeah,
I had certainly support from friends and family in the community. My father had died that same year that I moved back. So, and I think my mother moved about a year later. So I didn't have just my brother up here at that point. But still, a very familiar community and lots of people I knew.
Do you remember when you first got interested in architecture?
That's tough to say. It's right after. Well, first of all, I'll go back a little bit. I mean, I've always been interested in kind of building things, creating things. The kid with whether it's the Legos or the Lincoln Logs or the. So I think the idea of how things go together and how to do it in a creative way has always been kind of part of my life. And then my brother and I did talk as we graduated from college. He was going on to engineering school, and we talked about kind of, meeting up in 4 years. Not that we didn't see each other in the interim, but meeting up to start a business. And in college, I majored in visual communications, and a number of the professors were professors from the School of Architecture, so I got to know them. My brother and I, in summers and immediately when our first 8 months out of college, we built houses, just the two of us by ourselves, back when it was much simpler to do that. We built, I think, 3 places up at Sugarloaf, a place in Waterville. And so by that time, we realized we didn't want to be carpenters for the rest of our life, although we actually really enjoyed that. He went back to engineering school, and then I went back down to Cambridge. And I took a job at an architectural firm, and then I went back to grad school.
In the 40 years now of Platz Associates, have you done any other aquariums?
No. Those are the kind, moving up to Maine, those are the kind of jobs that you probably will never work on again.
Yeah.
Because they're hiring firms that have, 120 professionals in them. And, but that's okay. I mean, I got to do that. It was great. It was fun. And I enjoy what we're doing here.
Yeah. Maine could use a very large aquarium, I think, someday.
Yeah, the biggest problem with that will be the price tag, I can tell you.
Oh, yes. Do you recall, in 1980, you started the firm, and your brother's name's Jim, right?
Yes.
Do you recall your first job?
Oh, absolutely. Our first job we were actually working out of my brother's garage. And we, put together the proposals and built a scale model and went for the interview, and we got the job. And we had actually a lot of competition. I think what was going in our favor was we were unemployed. And so we had hundreds and hundreds of hours to put into this proposal, whereas if you were in an office like I'm in today, that would have cost $40,000. Nobody would have done it. But when you don't have any work, it's pretty easy to spend all your time doing one thing. So we put together a really good proposal, built a beautiful model of the prospective building, got the job, and then I think a couple weeks later when they told us they had the job, they said they wanted to arrange a meeting for the committee to come down and meet us in our office and see. And we scrambled, and we went, found some space, we rented it, we fitted it up, and just in time for them to come visit us.
Where was that first office?
It's right next door here. It's where the Key Bank building is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then we were there 3 years when we started designing this building, and then it took another year to build this.
Okay, so was this built in, 84 or something?
I think the first move-in was December of 84.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. And with that first job, you just did the design, right? You didn't actually...
Right. We didn't
contracted out the build. And,
yeah, we just did the design.
And at that point, you knew that was the model. That's what you wanted to do.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, it was a big job. It was a fairly good-sized job. So we probably took... I bet it took 9 months to design, over a year to build. It was on the waterfront. It was a school building. It was, and ironically, actually, the construction engineer superintendent of the project was someone I had gone to high school with. And when that project finished, he came here to work, and he's been here for the last 40 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
How have you, in those 40 years, assembled your team? What do you look for?
What we really look for are professionals who are ambitious, creative, and who don't draw boundaries around themselves in terms of what they're going to do. Because we're architects, we do construction management, we do planning and programming, and you could be doing anything at any given moment in time. And so we want people who are really open to kind of stretching themselves. They may be working on one job where, half the year they're in the office designing it, and the next half of the year they're out on the site 50% of their time making sure it gets built the way it needs to, because we're actually doing the construction management. So I like people who have vision.
And willing to adapt to different environments.
Willing to adapt and willing to learn new things.
Yeah. Architecture is inherently very creative work.
I hope so. I mean, it should be if we're doing it right.
Right. What are some other creative hobbies that you're interested in?
I mean, I do woodworking and building at home, small things. But I probably, in the last 10 years, have done a lot of photography. I've tried to, as I have gotten older, I've tried to take a few more vacations out in life and travel places and photograph a lot of wildlife, probably more wildlife than anything else, but also cities and icebergs in the Arctic and penguins in Antarctica.
How many times have you been to Antarctica?
Just once.
Just once? Are you going to go back?
I don't know. There's many more other places that I'd like to go.
So
I'm not quick on repeating trips.
It's quite the challenge to get there, right? Logistically?
To get there, you have to go down to the tip of South America, and then you have to go across Drake's Passage, which is where the Atlantic Ocean meets the Pacific Ocean. And Drake's can be a challenge. On the way over, it was pretty calm. I mean, actually, it was a nice trip over. And you hear really some dramatic things that happen in Drake's Passage. And so thought it was, fine, no big deal. Spent 10 days over there and then came back. Coming back, and I'm on a boat that's probably 275 feet. It was a good-sized boat. We had 45-foot waves that were breaking over this ship like it was a rowboat.
How long does the passage take?
Took about, I think he did it in 36 hours. Not land to land, but rough sea to rough sea, calm sea to calm sea.
Yeah. Wow.
It took about 36 hours to get out of that.
Wow.
Most people didn't leave their rooms.
Yeah.
I mean, just too hard to walk. I mean, I did, and a lot of people got sick.
Yeah. What time of year were you in Antarctica?
You have to go pretty much in our winter, their summer. It would be, I think they stop most trips there, when it comes to our summer, their winter.
And you went as a photography expedition type of thing?
Yeah.
What did you take pictures of there?
Oh, boy. I mean, you take pictures of unlimited icebergs and ice. But
lots of white things.
Yeah, lots of white things. Penguins, all kinds of birds. And I'm trying to think. In Antarctica, I'm not sure we saw any mammals. You see fish, whales, you see tons of penguins, 3-4 different varieties. But the only mammals are people that we saw. Unlike the Arctic, where you actually see polar bears and Arctic fox and reindeer, and you see lots of things that you don't see in the South.
This is going to be quite the departure, but from Antarctica. But you're heavily involved with the Public Theater in Lewiston.
I am.
How did you first get involved with that, and what is your role today?
That was interesting. Back in, let's see if I get the year right, but I think it was 1990. There were maybe 3 or 4 friends who got together with a director from Bangor who was leaving Penobscot Theater and decided we wanted to open a theater here. And it was a challenge. I mean, a lot of people said, nobody's going to come to a theater in Lewiston, Maine. But we did it anyway. So we the first year, I think we rented the movie house that was at the Auburn Mall. There were 2 cinemas in the Auburn Mall. And they had closed. So we rented one of them for our first season, and we were going to only do one show and see how it went. And we did the show, and I think it sold out. So we decided to do one more show. We did that. And then we realized, I can't remember whether the Auburn. I think they wanted to turn the theater into a store, which it eventually was. And we went over and we rented the old Ritz Theater in Lewiston, which when I grew up, when I was real young, it showed first-run films, and by the time I think I left town, it was showing mostly X-rated stuff. And it was vacant. So we rented it from a snowshoe club that owned the building and had their meeting space upstairs. We took the seats. I'm trying to think of where we got I think the seats we got from the Auburn Mall. I think we bought those seats, or they may have given them to us. But they had no upholstery on them. So we took all the bare seats that the upholstery mostly had been ripped off. And I found a woman, and I'm sorry I can't remember her name, an older woman. I say that today, but she seemed old back then. And she had been a stitcher at the mills, and she showed me how to reupholster seats. So myself and 4 other people reupholstered every one of those seats in the theater.
Over 300.
Yeah, 330 seats we upholstered.
Wow.
I still have some extras in my basement. But then, so we started that season. This director stayed with us through that season, and then he moved on, and we interviewed and hired Christopher Sherrio, who's there now.
Yeah.
And we've had 25 successful seasons. Yeah. It's been great. I'm the treasurer of the board. I keep waiting for my tenure to run up, but they keep re-electing me to the board.
Yeah, I wonder why.
I don't know.
Yeah, and I've been on the board for, I think, 5 years now.
Yeah, and it's great to have younger people on the board. You only have 20 more to go.
That's right. No, it's been fun to be a part of it and help steer it a little bit in a future.
It's a great place, and I think once we get through this COVID, we'll be back and running again. Yeah,
hopefully soon.
Yeah.
In regard to Lewiston Auburn, more on a macro level, it's a unique place in Maine because it's 2 separate cities, but often referred to as one community. Can you expand on that and talk a little bit how that affects some of its challenges?
Sure.
And some of the positivity that comes from that too? Sure.
I mean, I think, as you say, there is definitely positive aspects to that, and there are aspects to it that hold us back. I mean, they're both great cities. Unfortunately, the way they developed over the years, and I take that back, not all the mills were in Lewiston, but the majority of the mills were in Lewiston. There was Lown and Lunn and Clark Shoe in Auburn. I think they were all shoe companies in Auburn. But by and large, Auburn was more of a residential community, and Lewiston was the business community, which worked fine, I think, in the early years. It's worked to the detriment a little bit of Auburn as they try to develop economically to be more of a bedroom community. And I think they're moving out of that. But it's difficult not to have a real dense downtown because residents don't really pay the taxes that businesses pay to kind of keep the town thriving. Lewiston, on the other hand, has the dense city, which is great. They're thriving. But then they have the issues of dealing with a dense city. Mm-hmm. Whether it's policing issues or fire issues or just monetary issues of running a big city. So I think while they both function, very well, I was a proponent of joining them. And it's interesting because I think some of the people who were against joining them were more, I was born here, I grew up here, and Auburn's my city or Lewiston's my city, and I'm one of those people, but I think I felt like we have so much strength together, and we use that together. I don't want anybody to think I don't think that we do. I mean, I think we join forces all the time. But there would have been some unique ways we could join forces if we were one economic group, especially in our schools, the way we could specialize schools, and kids could go to, a school of math and science here or a school of humanities here. I mean, we could do some really innovative stuff. And I don't think it would take away from our identities. I mean, you'd still have Edward Little High School and the Red Eddies. You'd still have Lewiston High School and the Blue Devils. I mean, that stuff would not have to go away. So while I think we'll do fine as two cities, I think it might take a little longer for each city to get where they want to go. I've always thought economically these cities, and I've been here a long time, we're unique in the state in that we don't usually suffer the real deep lows, but we also don't kind of joy in the real highs. We've got this kind of slow, slugging attitude of moving forward, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So we keep moving forward, but at a slow pace. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe something innovative could have propelled us forward a little faster, but we'll get there.
I think I talked to you at one point over the years about, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't there a proposal for the city of Auburn to have the turnpike exit in New Auburn?
Yeah, it's funny. For years and years.
And if that had come to pass, how would that affect this community?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can tell you how it would have affected it. I mean, I think it would have been positive. Auburn decided early on, I think, and this I get only from what people have told me, I mean, I don't know, mm-hmm. that they didn't want the turnpike to go right through the city. Mm-hmm. And they chose instead to have kind of the Washington Avenue entry to the city. Which in itself is not bad, I think. I mean, I think it could have worked out better than it did. But then for the last 20 years, people have said, we need more exits. We need, an exit downtown, and it'll stimulate growth. And then I think finally, the Maine Turnpike Authority said, okay, fine. We'll fund you one. Here's where it's got to go. They did all the engineering, and then because anybody near it said, well, we don't want the exit near us,
right? So
it died. Uh-huh. And my guess is the Turnpike Authority is going to say, look, we tried, mm-hmm. and it's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. I don't know that it's essential. I think Washington Avenue could be improved. Mm-hmm. I think if Washington Avenue were more like what do I want to say? More like a turnpike spur than the road it is, where you can get on it in so many places. It might feel more like you're just getting off at this exit, getting onto this kind of semi-turnpike and getting downtown.
Right.
If you could do more like back roads, but you could get on and off it in multiple places, but you'd have to go behind the buildings to get to the next 5 buildings or something to keep the traffic really just moving along there at a good pace. It's already a divided highway, so it wouldn't be that difficult.
Right.
I think and put things on it that really make people want to stop and shop or do things. You could probably turn it to your advantage.
Sounds like a fun project for you.
There's a lot of them.
Where or what do you hope to see Lewiston Auburn in next 10, 20, 25 years?
Love to see a lot more young people moving in, young professional people, and young people of all walks of life. I think we're starting to build living units downtown, which will start to draw people in. I think the more people we draw in, the more amenities we can offer. I mean, it's very difficult to kind of build a nice restaurant and then hope everybody comes when there's nobody here to come. or build a bar or any of these things. So they kind of have to work in unison. People have to come and take a chance on us, enjoy what we do have, and then we'll build more for them. And I think, again, that is happening. I mean, there's some nice apartments going up. They're filling up pretty fast. We've got more restaurants and bars and pubs than we've had in a long time. A little hard to tell right now with the environment we're in, but I think things really were starting to gel before this whole virus started, and I think we'll pick right up as soon as it goes. But I would like to see in 10 years, a corridor for Bates students to flow right downtown, more students downtown, University of Maine downtown, which will create more housing needs and more restaurants and coffee shops and delis and things like that. I think we have a lot of potential. I think the time's right now. I think Portland is very expensive to live in. If you just graduated from college and you find you need to spend, $3,000 a month on an apartment, and you don't really want to live with 3 other guys, it's a problem. And you can come up here and get some really nice living. And it's ironic because even if you were to work in Portland or Westbrook, you're 25 minutes away. And sometimes people view that as far, but if you lived in Brooklyn and had to get to Manhattan every morning, you better give yourself more than 25 minutes.
That's right. Oh, yeah.
And you're only 2 miles away. So,
and you're going to be trapped on a metal tube.
Oh, I mean, it's a disastrous life if you ask me.
Yeah.
But so I think we have a lot to give. I know young Portland people have moved up here who went from living in, a 900 square foot apartment to having like 10 acres in their backyard for less money.
Yeah.
And so I think we're really ripe. I think it's unfortunate that we had this interruption right now because we were really, I think, moving fast. But I'm confident it'll pick up.
Is there a way, once we get through this pandemic, is there a way to sort of jumpstart that again?
Well, I think we can, because during the pandemic, one thing I've noticed is we haven't really, in my office here, we really haven't slowed up at all. We're still designing, I think, and this isn't all in Lewiston, Auburn, but in the state of Maine right now, and nothing in Portland, so more rural Maine, we have in the office under design 75, 150, probably 300 units of housing.
Wow.
Which speaks to the shortage. The fact that it's not in Portland speaks to the fact people need it outside of the urban area. And of those, at least 160 of them are in Lewiston, Auburn.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And going back, you said, wouldn't it be great to have like the University of Maine downtown?
Yeah.
When you say downtown, do you mean Lewiston downtown or Auburn downtown? Or either?
It could be either. I think somewhere right close to this bridge so that it's, central.
Yeah.
Within walking distance to people who are living downtown. I mean, that's one thing. If you're going to provide a lot of downtown housing, which you hope some students will partake of, then you want the school to be nearby.
What do you think are some natural assets that this community has that have been underutilized?
Well, the riverfront, certainly. I mean, we could definitely open up the riverfront. We have the canal system, which
has had some proposals over the years.
We've had some proposals, and slowly, since we first started working on the Bates Mill, we've worked with the city. We finally, and I think it took 10 years, to get the ownership of the canals into the city's hands rather than the power company's hands, with a contract that requires water be flowing down them. Someday I would like to see the fences come down. I'd like to see the water level get a little bit higher so that it's not steep down into the water. I'd like to see us build little land peninsulas that kind of went out overlooking the canal where you could have a picnic, where you could, drop a remote control boat in the water and play around. We could really make those canals something to be used by people all the time. We have Lost Valley ski area. I mean, it's a small ski area, but if you're bringing up kids in this town and you want them to ski 4 or 5 days a week like we did when we grew up, you couldn't get anything better.
That's true.
I mean, it's well run. It's a short run. I mean, it's not, you're not going to, have black diamond trails for people, but that's where we all learned to ski. And we used to ski, well, when I grew up here, the ski teams from the high school and junior highs were incredible. Skiing was just a major thing, and you were out there 5 days a week.
Mm-hmm. That's where I learned how to ski.
Yeah.
It's a great place for that.
It's an incredible place to learn.
It's obviously a different style of skiing because it is so much smaller. But
sure. I mean,
it's a lot of fun too.
Yeah, you'll graduate on to bigger things, but it's also the kind of place that you can take your 12-year-old and drop them off there and pick them up at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a relatively safe environment. They're doing something that's positive with their friends, spending time outdoor in the winters.
And it's going back to the river, what specifically could you see developing on that?
Well,
because it runs pretty far to what would be the Durham line, correct?
Yeah, you'd go down to probably the Durham boat launch. Actually, you can go down further than that, I think. But that's a place where you can get out.
Right.
And I know people have done that. You got to be a little careful on the rips down here. Mm-hmm. But or you could put in after those too. I mean, there's plenty of places to put in. I think it's a great asset to be canoeing or rowing. I think at the right time of year, you could have some rowing regattas. Mm-hmm. I mean, we could do things that other people don't do.
Right.
You got to be imaginative to draw people in. I think the art that we're working on in Lewiston and Auburn right now can be a tremendous draw to this city. Yeah. We're getting positive feedback from it. We unveiled a sculpture by Andy Rosen in the Mills a couple of weeks ago. He's going to be doing another one in the canals in the spring. There's one going into, not by him, but by another artist, into Bonnie Park in the spring for Auburn. I think there are a couple murals that are going to be going up. We're looking at another sculpture. We'd like to create a real art trail of sculptures and murals and industrial art from Museum LA so that we're a destination. People come here to look at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you've been a huge supporter of the arts over the years, and looking out your window here, you can actually see one recently that's been put up on.
Oh, Charlie Hewitt's Hopeful sign.
Yeah,
and that was great.
What was the motivation behind that piece, and to put it on Batesville Mill 5?
I think Charlie is originally from Lewiston. And as you may or may not know, he gave us the rattle. That's one of his sculptures. That's at the Bates Mill right now on one of the old silos. It's the same type of artwork that he put in the High Line in New York City. And he has one on Congress Street in Portland. And he kind of feels like Lewiston always gets neglected, and it's his hometown, so he wanted to give something back. So he gave that back. And then he and I were talking one day after he did the Hopeful sign down in Portland, and he said, we need to do one up here, and it's got to be bigger. It's got to be the biggest one. And I said, sure, Charlie, what do you want to do? So he designed it. It's a 30-foot-long Hopeful sign. He wanted it where everybody would see it all day long and all night long. You can't get a better place than Bates Mill number 5. I mean, I don't know the current numbers, but I think that Main Street over to Court Street is one of the busiest routes in the state. Mm-hmm. I mean, tens of thousands of cars a day. And we get all kinds of comments.
Maybe more.
Yeah. I mean, people love
and
it.
It's lit. And is it lit 24 hours?
24 hours a day. Yeah. It's all LEDs.
Yep.
Very little draw of electricity.
Yep.
And it's just great. It's great to have it there.
What do you think? What's going on with Bates Mill 5 generally, and what would you like to see happen with that?
We have one tenant who definitely wants to go in. We have two other tenants who are kind of weighing their options of where they want to go. I think they strongly like Mill number 5. I would love to attract the University of Maine to come in there. And I think they're interested, but I think they're looking at a number of places. I think they'd like to be downtown. They want to be downtown, but they have to look around. So we'll do what we can to try to court them. I think those would all be really great uses, and would let us start to develop it.
Mm-hmm. I'm just looking at there's so much you can't. There's just so much brick over there.
There is,
and you go into different mills, and it's impressive how expansive these places are, but they're also empty. How can we continue to encourage development and fill them up with professionals or students, creatives? A mill space would be a perfect art studio.
Yep. Well, I think it's happening. I mean, if we started out with the Bates Mill, and excluding mill number 5, we had about 900,000 square feet to rent. We've developed 700,000 of that already. And it's not all kind of in the past. I mean, Northeast Bank just moved into 20,000 square feet of Mill 2 4 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. So we are attracting people. I mean, they love the space. The people working there love it, as well as the employers. It's very, as you say, you've been in a very unique space. I mean, it's got all wood timbers. It's 14, sometimes 16-foot ceilings, depending on what building you're in. Things that you would never do in a new building today. You just can't afford it. I mean, you might get 9-foot ceilings in a building today, but 14, 16-foot ceilings, you just can't do it. You could do it in the lobby, but you can't do it everywhere. So it's just phenomenal space. I mean, the windows in some of these rooms are 12 feet high. You go to Mill 6, the windows are 14 and a half feet high. Mm-hmm. You just don't do those things today. So they're great spaces. I mean, people love them. They make great places for gatherings, restaurants, pubs. We've got, 3 restaurants in the mills right now, and people seem to love going there. So I think it is happening. It's a lot of space to fill quickly, but I don't see it slowing down. I think we're still very. There's a couple things we have when and I don't want to compete with Portland, but by the same token, these businesses do look at Portland. And one thing we have going for us is we have parking. The city has been incredible in making sure that there's enough parking for people to move up here. We also have rents that are 35% less than Portland. So if you're a big company that doesn't really need to be downtown, you don't have people walking off the street to see you, and your employees value being 5 minutes from hundreds of acres of hiking trails rather than being, downtown Portland and working their way out to somewhere that feels outdoors, this is a perfect place for you. Mm-hmm. If they like to ski, you're a half hour closer to Sugarloaf, which can make a big difference on a Friday night. So I think we've got lots to sell.
Recently, a business that came into the mill space was Grand Rounds. How did that happen, and what was the process like? They were competing with other cities.
Yes,
and why did they choose Lewis and Auburn?
So they're a company that started out in San Francisco and grew very quickly. It's a healthcare referral system, and they were just doing really well. I mean, they're handling big companies, managing their healthcare. And what they quickly found was, as they grew, and their companies that they were managing were on the East Coast, or even on the Central Time, it was tough for them to manage because now they need multiple shifts working through the night to deal with the time zone changes. So they decided they needed an East Coast presence. One of their vice presidents was actually from Maine, and actually the owner of the company is from Manchester, New Hampshire. So they had some kind of Northeast roots. So she encouraged him to come here, meet with me, and take a look at the mills, and he just loved them. But he said we have to go through a process. And then I think a couple weeks later he told me that they were looking at Baltimore, Boston, in Maine they were looking in Biddeford, and they were looking in Lewiston. And he said, we need to start out, we're going to have 140 people. We expect to be at about 240 in 3 years and maybe 500 in 6 years. So he said the number of things are important. He said obviously housing for them is important, but they don't need to live right downtown. I mean, they'll all probably be pretty mobile. He said one of the most important things will be parking. And in the end, he said, Boston, he said, there's no parking in Boston. He said, there just isn't any. And he said, it's not the money, there just isn't any. And he said, Baltimore is similar. He said, it's crowded, there's no parking. At the time, Biddeford said they had plenty of parking, and he said when he went down and looked at it, actually, it was all on-street parking. I mean, they do have lots of parking, but it's not guaranteed. I mean, you park on the street when you find a space, and they had plenty of on-street parking. We guaranteed him all his parking in a parking garage. And he said, and actually I was very apologetic. I said, it is going to cost you like $52 a month. And he said, he kind of looked at me and smiled. He said, well, our headquarters are in San Francisco. He said, we're paying about $475 a month right now. He said, so we can handle $52 a month. And he kind of laughed. I mean, that's what he loves about Maine. I mean, it's just, you get value for what you get in. And so that really attracted him here. I mean, the mill and the parking, he could have, we just finished out new space for him last year, 50,000 square feet all on one floor. And he has an option on the 50,000 square feet above him for next year. So it was great. And they have great employees. Their employees are probably all somewhere between 25 and 40. Mm-hmm. They don't all live in Lewiston, Auburn. I mean, they live in Sabattis and Turner and Greene and, within 20 minutes of here. And a lot of them live in town too, but, and that's the way it should be. I mean, they love the fact that they live in the country, but they are in a business that deals with people all over the United States.
Yep. Yeah, you can't underestimate the power of trees.
Right, exactly.
And
that we have.
And he was saying, projecting to have 500 employees in 6 years.
That's what they were originally projecting. I don't know where they're at right now. I think
here in Maine, or just
in Maine,
across the country.
In Maine.
Okay.
I think they're at like 240 right now. Mm-hmm. So they have been growing. I don't know if they're on track that they were originally, but they definitely have been growing.
But if they do get to that point, they're all going to be housed here in Lewiston, correct?
Right.
That was the idea.
Yeah. In terms of their Maine, they're not going to do another office somewhere else in Maine.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I say that. I certainly hope they're not.
And so one of the factors in choosing that space, the mill space, was the option to grow into it further.
We've kind of guaranteed them the ability to expand.
Right. That's great. Switching gears back to you. Are you a reader?
Yes. Sometimes I'm, I wouldn't say to a detriment, but I'm occasionally accused of, when I'm in a room with lots of people, of just reading my book and not talking to anybody. I now read everything on a Kindle. I never used to do that. Mm-hmm. But when I started traveling, I realized I can't carry all these books. And so I think I'm on my 800th book on my Kindle.
Wow.
So I probably read at least a couple of books a week.
And those Kindles too have gotten really, really nice. Like the newest ones have it looks like real paper, right?
Well, it looks like real paper, and they're really tiny now. I mean, they're just so. Your listeners won't be able to.
Yeah, I know.
but they're so thin,
and they're so light, and
light.
We have an entire library in this thing.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
I love them, and I read all the time. I mean, I read till 1 a.m.
You've got a very low battery warning on here, but I'm assuming you haven't charged it in weeks,
right? Yeah,
because the things last forever.
Yeah, they go for a few weeks.
What's in your library? Is it an eclectic mix?
Yeah, I have no specific thing that I read. I read a lot of just some of them are just mysteries and stuff. I read autobiographies. I'll read environmental stuff, or just whatever catches my fancy, or somebody recommends.
Yeah. Any titles that have really stuck that you keep coming back to rereading?
Well, I would say one of my favorite books of all time is Devil in the White City.
I haven't heard of it.
You haven't heard of it, so you have to.
I'm writing it down, though.
You have to read it. It's one of my favorite books, and everybody I've given it to has loved it. It's written by Eric Larson, and it's written. It's, I would say, it's part fiction and part factual. It's written in the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago, called The White City because the theme of it was all the buildings and architecture were white. In the 1890, and then there's also kind of like a murder story that goes on the side. I mean, he blended two things. But what's fascinating is just reading about the 1893 World's Fair. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was such an important World's Fair in terms of America. It was the World's Fair that's responsible for us having alternating current in the United States. Wow. They were getting ready to wire it for electricity. Remember, 1893 is when they were just starting to get electricity in the United States. And the places that had it were using DC current, which is not a very convenient way to operate electricity. So the World's Fair Committee asked for proposals on how the World's Fair was going to be wired. Alternating current won out, and that took over the United States. Oh, wow. They also... I believe it was and I won't say it's when they first started, but they were building some multi-story buildings, and they were looking for ways of making them accessible to people. And a guy named, Otis, came up with what's called shoeless brakes for an elevator, so that if it fell, it would stop immediately. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of the birth of the safe elevators.
Oh, wow.
For the landmark, every World's Fair had a landmark. Paris's was the Eiffel Tower. And so they were looking for something really just novel and something that would knock people's socks off. And they found this young, I'd say 25-year-old engineer. I might have the age wrong, but he was a young engineer. And his last name was Ferris. And that's where he built the largest Ferris wheel. In the United States at the World's Fair. And it goes on and on. There's just a bunch of stuff that happened. Incredible architects that worked on the buildings. It was interesting. Louis Sullivan worked on the World's Fair Committee. And he had, I gotta make sure I get this story right, but I think he had a young architect that worked for him that he put in charge of his office while he worked on the World's Fair. And turned out the young architect quit and went and opened up his own studio, Frank Lloyd Wright. But just the book is just full of rich stories like that. Just a really good book.
Yeah, I can see, as you describe it, your love for architecture. I think that goes into.
Yeah, I mean, Burnham did all the landscape architecture there. Yeah. I mean, it was a whole building of a city.
Right.
And the murder story was kind of just this thing. I don't know. It was creeping up in the background, and I'm sure he did it for character building and just so he wouldn't just be telling story after story. But it was. Yeah, you got to read it. I think I have it here. I'll give it to you.
Oh, cool.
You can take with you.
Awesome.
But yeah, so I enjoy reading.
Did you, or do you have a mentor? Did you have a mentor growing up?
Growing up.
Or even professionally in business?
Yeah, I mean, I think professionally, I wouldn't say one specific one. I mean, I would say I was definitely influenced by Frank Lloyd Wright's architecture, and certainly was when I was in grad school. Worked with some really great architects before I went back to grad school, and I think they all, in different ways, influenced me. I don't think, I've had a mentor in the last 30 years. I mean, I've kind of been on my own up here, so I wouldn't say I did. As a young kid, I think, probably most people's mentors are their fathers. I mean, just they kind of shape what you're how you think and what you might be in life. But then he died when I was in grad school, so he had no part of my professional life, really. I think certainly he had an influence on how I view living in a community. You give back as much as you can. You don't just take from communities. You need to be part of a solution of making them better places to live. I think that's certainly a philosophy I grew up with.
Do you think that philosophy is your purpose?
I would say it's a major part of my purpose. Sure. And I think it's something I try to, I don't want to use the word teach because I don't think that's true, but it's something I try to pass on to people around me. I mean, I think it's too bad to see people kind of step in and out all the time and not really be part of it. I think it's important to kind of, not that you have to plant roots in a community if it's not the place for you, but I think while you are there, it's important to be involved. I think I think when people are involved in the community and they're involved with other people who are involved in the community, it's easier to see people as people. And I think there's less of a lot of this kind of hatred that's going around. And, when you look at somebody in the eye and you hear their story, it's tough to really challenge them on it. It's easier to maybe understand their point of view.
Yeah. As someone that's given back and given to so many organizations, individuals within the community over the years, what do you get in return from that? Why do you do it?
I think it makes me feel satisfied, good that I have some effect on what's going on around me, some positive effects. I'm sure I have negative effects on people too, but you try your best to be positive.
My thanks to Tom for sharing his time, wisdom, and insight with us. It was awesome to hear the perspective of someone who's given so much to the community he truly cares about. As Tom is my last guest of this first season, be sure to stay tuned for a special edition season finale. Positive vibes and well wishes from all of us at LA Metro Magazine. Until next time, I'm your host, Colby Michaud. Make sure you're being entertained, staying informed, and getting inspired.